Welcome to Hmong Women Lead 2025. It is so good to be with you again. You know, every time I get to be with my Hmong sisters, whether that be in an event, sitting in circle, in my backyard, on a summit, or on Zoom, I'm reminded of something sacred, and that is that we were never meant to carry our pain alone. We were never meant to heal in silence, suffer in shame, or lead while disconnected from our bodies and stories. And yet, how many of us were raised in silence, told not to talk back, not to cry too much, not to ask for too much? I want to begin here with our truth, because today's conversation isn't just about circle and healing. It's about how circle, true sisterhood, community, and healing can become a structure, a leadership model, a new way of being with one another. So our theme today is rooted in resilience, leading with courage, healing, and community. But before we talk about resilience, we need to name the reasons we had to become resilient in the first place. You see, patriarchy taught us that leadership looks like hierarchy and power. Cultural silence taught us that survival means shrinking, enduring, and staying in our place. Polygamy taught us that women are interchangeable, that love is conditional, that our worth is negotiable. Generational trauma taught us that to belong, we must betray our voice. And internalized shame taught us that emotions are weakness and softness is a liability. Gender expectations taught us to always give and nurture, never ask for too much. Community betrayal taught us that speaking the truth can cause us belonging. Scarcity taught us to compete with our own sisters instead of build with them. And perfectionism taught us that unless we're flawless, we're unworthy. We learned that closeness comes with conditions, that trust must be earned but never tested, that truth must be hidden to keep the peace, and that to survive, we must abandon parts of ourselves. What if that is not true anymore? What if leadership is not about dominance, but about devotion and care and influence? And what if healing begins when we stop performing power and start practicing presence? I didn't begin this work in circle as an expert. I began as someone who had lost her voice and needed a way to find it again. Circle became that space for me. In circle, I discovered I didn't have to lead alone. There was no stage, no podium, no hierarchy. I love that it's just women side by side, holding space for one another to breathe, to share, to be seen. That's when I began to understand circle isn't just a format. It's a way of being, a way of healing, a way of remembering who we are. In circle, we practice letting go of expectations, the need to fix ourselves and others. We practice letting go of judgment, control, pride, and fear. And we practice allowing what needs to show up as gifts and medicine that we're ready for. We welcome playfulness and curiosity. We don't perform power. We practice being brave. And that stands for being bold, responsible, authentic, vulnerable, and empathetic. We listen, not to fix, not to lecture, not to advise, but to witness. We hold space with presence, with compassion. No sister is left behind. Everyone participates. Every voice matters. Everyone shares. We don't just watch, we participate. We speak from I statement, claiming our truth without apology. We honor storytelling as sacred medicine. We slow down, we reclaim softness, not as weakness, but as wisdom. We dance, not to impress, but to express and to release. And when we do, we release judgment. We let go of comparison. We move in our own rhythm and we allow others to do the same. In circle, we embrace each other like wildflowers in a garden. Each is beautiful, needed, rooted in her own power. No one more worthy than the other, just different, just whole, just enough. And when we show up in full truth, when we drop the mask, when we choose connection over perfection, we remember who we are. We return to ourselves. And in that return, we become whole again. That's the medicine of circle. That's the power of sisterhood. And that's the kind of system I would love to see in the world. And I'm here to co-create that. Not built on power over, but one grounded in power with. So here's the question I want to ask us all. What if our circles weren't the exception? What if they were the blueprint? What if the values we practice in sisterhood, like truth-telling, listening, co-creation, became the foundation for how we built systems? Imagine schools, nonprofits, clinics, youth programs, where story is honor, where leaders listen before they speak, where meetings begin with breath, not just business, where decisions are made in community, not control, where safety is built through relationship, not just rules. These aren't just soft practices. I think they are design principles. I think this is what system care could look like if we were shaped by lived experience and collective wisdom. Because we're not just healing the sister wound, we're healing the leadership wound, we're healing the system wound. And in that healing, we're modeling something powerful, right? This circle approach to community care, rooted not in authority, but in authenticity, not in fixing, but in witnessing, creating an environment that people are heard, seen, and belong. Many of us grew up in systems that never asked how we were doing, only what we could do for others. We learned to keep going, to keep quiet, to keep it together. In circle, we begin asking different questions like what hurts, what heals, what do you need, what are you reclaiming? And I began to wonder, what if our schools ask those questions? What if our nonprofits, our policies make rooms for those questions too? Because I believe that what we do in circle can influence how we care for each other everywhere.
I want to end with this reflection. What do you want to pass on to the next generation? Or what do you want to stop passing on to the next generation? A legacy of silence and suffering, or a legacy of truth-telling, softness, and systems built around care and psychological safety? A system where we don't have to wear masks to fit in? A community where we can be ourselves, go deeper, and talk about what matters to us? A place, a home, an organization where we can lean in, where we can be ourselves, where we can feel, where we can share openly and listen deeply, where we can reflect on each other's greatness and shadows. I believe that what we practice in circle, when we integrate it into our lives, we can really shift from a patriarchal society to one that is based on equality. When we gather in circle, we transform ourselves in each other. And when we transform ourselves, we bring a new consciousness to our families and our communities. When our communities and families become more conscious, we change society. Thank you for allowing me to share today. I invite you to sit with these questions and reflect them on your worksheet. If you feel a call to co-create what's next, I invite you to come and experience Circle with me on June 29th. I will put a link for you to check out. If you have never experienced Circle before, come feel and experience what it means to be seen and held in community. And if you have, come Circle with me again to connect, root deeper, and witness each other's journey of returning to wholeness.
Welcome to Hmong Women Lead. Do you know how to protect your child from sexual abuse? When you are actively involved in your child's life, the warning signs of child sexual abuse are more obvious, and it makes your child more comfortable coming to you if something is not right. Children love their caregivers, even the ones that abuses them. My name is Jewel Mindy Hugh, and I go by she, her pronouns. I am a Hmong American licensed clinical social worker in Colorado. I have over a decade of experience working with families and professionals in a field of mental health and child welfare. For the past 7 years, I have provided independent child protection case consultations. 3 years ago, I added training to support my clients. I currently investigate sexual, physical, and emotional abuse on a national level. Lastly, I am the Vice President of Seeds for Hope, a Hmong woman nonprofit funded with a mission to empower young people worldwide to see themselves as leaders. All in all, I am passionate about social justice and serving community. As a disclaimer, I am not an attorney, I am not a lawyer, and I do not provide any legal advice. State laws differ from state to state, and so the information from this presentation mostly pertains to the state of Colorado when we're talking about legalities. This is a public platform. Please consider the information you share today as it may be sensitive. I am a mandatory reporter, and so if you disclose any child abuse information, I am required to report it to the appropriate authority. Now, the topic of child abuse in general, and today we will discuss child sexual abuse. It can be overwhelming and disheartening given its nature, hence the title of this presentation. Let us talk taboo, child sexual abuse in a Hmong community. What keeps us from talking about child sexual abuse? Well, there are many reasons why, especially as it affects our own lives or the lives of those we care about. In most societies, child sexual abuse is a taboo topic, making it difficult for most people to talk about openly. Other obstacles include doubting our own perceptions, being afraid to accuse someone, and being unable or unwilling to go through the pain that stems from acknowledging that we and or someone we love is being abused or abusing. I have been doing this type of work for over 14 years, and so I am aware that when discussing and presenting these matters, I may be very matter of fact. My language is direct and transparent. For example, I will be using words such as vagina, vulva, penis, anal, sexual, sex, and intercourse. Some of these items that we talk about may make you feel a certain way, trigger some sort of thought or emotion. As we move through, please do what you need to take care of yourself. Some ideas to help you move through today's presentation are: take a break and walk away for a minute or two. You can step outside to look at the sky. You can walk away to get a drink of water in your kitchen. Again, do what you need to take care of yourself. What is child sexual abuse? Child sexual abuse is a form of child abuse that includes sexual activity with any child under the age of 18 years old. A child cannot consent, also known as give permission, to any form of sexual activity. Child sexual abuse does not need to include physical contact. There are many forms of child sexual abuse. Some forms of child abuse include exposing oneself to a child. For example, showing one's penis to a child, having sex in the presence of a child, fondling, touching a child's nipple, vulva, penis, having vaginal penile intercourse with a child, masturbating in the presence of a child, forcing a child to masturbate, forcing a child to touch their own genitals, obscene conversations, phone calls, text messages, and/or digital interactions. Other forms of child sexual abuse are producing, recording, owning, or sharing child sexual materials, such as photographs, images, videos, all also known as pornography. And lastly, other forms of child sexual abuse include sex of any kind with the child, including oral or anal. Now, I want to spend a little time on sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, obtaining, patronizing, or solicitation of a person under the age of 18. Examples of child sex trafficking: a mother dating and allowing her boyfriend to have sex with her 10-year-old child in exchange for the boyfriend to pay for the mother's rent. A 15-year-old exchanges sex for having an older friend pay for her hotel room because she's a runaway. A 17-year-old Hmong Thai girl is sent to the US to live with her uncle, who promises her a better life. The uncle forces her to engage in sex with his friends for money. Or the uncle forces her to marry an older man in exchange for money, the dowry. A 16-year-old Hmong Lao girl marries an adult Hmong man in the US in exchange for him sending money to her parents monthly. I gave some of these examples because we see some of them happening today, especially with older Hmong men going to Laos to marry very young Hmong Lao girls. Now, in this section, I will talk about child sexual abuse in the United States as a whole. Many children wait to report or never report child sexual abuse. They often feel a sense of guilt, and they may also experience self-destructive thoughts. Children do not want to get their abuser in trouble. Again, often they love their abuser, and/or they depend on their abuser, or someone they really love and/or love depend on that abuser. They don't report because they're ashamed. They were threatened not to tell. They worry that because they are a kid, no one will believe them. They worry about being taken away from their home if they tell. They worry that if they tell, someone else in the family may get hurt. They worry about what other people will think of them if they told. They blame themselves. They made a promise to keep the abuse a secret. They're scared. They think that they should have fought harder or screamed louder, that they let it happen and should have stopped it from happening in the first place. In sexual abuse cases, often the abuser will convince the child that they won't be believed, or that they were somehow responsible for the abuse and will be punished for it. To keep the abuse secret, the abuser will often play on the child's fear, embarrassment, or guilt about what is happening. Sexual violence to children is difficult to measure, and there's no single source of research or data that provides a complete picture. Researchers agree that the incidence of child sexual abuse is far greater than what is reported to the authorities or even to family and friends of the child. There is no national reporting system for crimes against children in the United States, and the definition of child sexual abuse vary from state to state. In most cases where there is credible evidence that a child has been sexually abused through penetration, only 15% of those children will have genital injuries consistent with sexual abuse. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1 out of 4 girls are sexually abused before age 18. This is hard to imagine, but think about how many of us are here in this room, this presentation. Approximately 1 out of 4 of us were sexually abused before the age of 18. 1 out of 20 boys are sexually abused before age 18. Children are most vulnerable to child sexual abuse between the ages of 7 and 13. These children are somewhere between the grades of 1st and 7th. Most daunting, 90% of children who have been sexually abused were abused by someone they knew and trusted, and the abuser is almost always a family member. I want to dispel the myth of the stranger danger concept that the abuser is a stranger to the child. Most times, the abuser is not a stranger to a child. Of those girls who were sexually abused as a child by a family member, 63% of them reported a rape or attempted rape after they turn 14 years old. Girls and boys who were sexually abused as children are approximately 13 times more likely than their peers who were not sexually abused to experience rape or attempted rape in their first year of college. Compared to those with no history of child sexual abuse, boys who were sexually abused were approximately 5 times more likely to cause teen pregnancy, 3 times more likely to have multiple sexual partners, and 2 times more likely to have unprotected sexual intercourse. Now, what are the consequences of child sexual abuse? Experiencing child sexual abuse can affect how a child will grow up to think, act, and feel over their lifetime. This can result in short and long-term physical, mental, and behavioral health consequences. A child who was sexually abused usually develops low self-esteem, a feeling of worthlessness, and an abnormal or distorted view of sex. They may view sexual activity in or intercourse as normal. They may become more drawn and mistrustful of adults. They may become suicidal. They may contract sexual transmitted infections, STIs, such as syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia. They may sustain physical injuries to their genitals. They may have chronic conditions later in life, such as heart disease, obesity, cancer. They may struggle with their mental health, such as with depression. They may struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. Behaviorally, they may misuse drugs and/or alcohol, engage in risky behaviors, such as having sexual intercourse with multiple partners, or behaviors that could result in pregnancy. They may be easily agitated, irritated, and/or hostile. They may be at increased risk for sexual violence, and they may be at increased risk for suicide or suicide attempts. Child sexual abuse affects thousands of families each year. Most of the research around child sexual abuse is related to the dominated European American culture, so Mika. There is little research about how child sexual abuse affects Asian American families and their communities, specifically Hmong American families. However, what we do know based on our research out there is that Hmong girls are sexually abused more than Hmong boys. Most Hmong children who experience sexual abuse for the first time are preteens, so they are typically between the ages of 10 to 12. This is different than other races in this country, which their first sexual abuse experience was between the ages of 7 to 13. Hmong cultural factors play a role in increasing the risk of sexual abuse. Almost all Hmong children know who their perpetrators are, and approximately 60% of them are by male relative, including the father. Hmong mothers were half as likely to report abuse to authorities as opposed to other races. Hmong families were also less likely than other races to complete the evaluation and treatment of a child who experienced sexual abuse. And Hmong families were found to have a lack of awareness to the problem of child sexual abuse. What are the reasons Hmong children do not report sexual abuse? Lack of communication between children and parents, especially about sex. Guilt, humiliation or fear of humiliation. Rejection from the family, including parents and siblings. Rejection from the clan, even rejection from the Hmong community. Shame. Lack of knowledge about sexual abuse. Lack of parental protection, or that the child will not be believed. The child's disclosure of sexual abuse will not be accepted by the Hmong community. Or the child will be accused of inviting the abuse. How many times have we heard from our parents, I told you not to be naughty. 姑姑個做得錯波呢不要。這個字又對應到事。我這個項目在呢可空呢我的個。呢度面有自己嘛只我領導。A good child would have never done what you did. The child may be shunned, be forced to marry their perpetrator. And then there's the opposite. No one's going to marry that child. What other mental health impacts to Hmong children who experience child sexual abuse? Hmong children are more likely to express suicidal ideation or attempt suicide. They're more likely to run away, be truant, more likely to marry under the age of 18, and are more likely to become pregnant under the age of 18. Unlike their peers, Hmong children are less likely to display anger, act out sexually, and they tend to have less supportive caretakers. Now, despite the Hmong being in the US for 50 years today, last month, patriarchy remains a way of cultural practice within the Hmong community. One of the most important values in a patriarchal culture is gender roles. There are very specific roles of what men, women, and children should be and how they should behave. Hmong lineages are made up of the husband's male relatives, such as their brothers, uncles, and grandfathers. Hmong also practices a collectivistic culture. The family clan's well-being is more important than that of the individual. So what does this look like? Well, it is common for multiple generations or relatives to live in one home, right? So you have, your family, right? So you have this multi-generation household where there are multiple generations of family that live together, and they have children and cousins are living together with uncles and aunties. You also have a lot of relatives, like aunts that marry outside, bringing their kids for grandma and grandpa to babysit. Hmong families usually conceal problems that are cultural taboos for fear of stigma and shame. These problems become shared family secrets. These shared family secrets involve family issues that only the nuclear family knows about, and people from the outside of the family are kept away from knowing. Shared family secrets are supposed to be kept quiet to prevent others from judging and shaming the family, the clan, and the community. Saving face in a Hmong community is very important because even though they reside in different locations, they will share the same social space. The social space represents a symbolic community where Hmong from all over the nation are united, which allows for the news of gossip to be passed quickly through social gatherings such as the Hmong New Year in Fresno and Minnesota. We have the 4th of July tournament in Minnesota. You have gatherings as, Hopli or Nenglo, all those gatherings, right? So what happens when child sexual abuse is disclosed in a Hmong community? When a child discloses sexual abuse, most often the adults in the family will ask the child and family to conceal it, to keep it a secret. Typically, then a clan meeting will be called for the elder men to meet and discuss the disclosure. When a perpetrator denied that the sexual abuse occurred, they are most likely to be believed by the elders in the community. I mean, how could a child say or even think of such a thing, right? That is what the elders in community go to straight. It is the child's reputation at risk and not the perpetrator. Now, if the child is strong enough and has a strong support system to maintain their stance that they were indeed sexually abused, often money is passed to the child's family from the perpetrator's family, or even from the uncle to the niece, to call to fix the family's face. Some Hmong cultural practices today play a huge factor in child sexual abuse. It appears that we as a community, we're aware that it exists. However, we as a community, we have different definitions and understanding of what child sexual abuse is. For example, many Hmong see child sexual abuse as an adult having sexual intercourse with a prepubescent child. Hmong view preteens children, ages between 10 to 12, as adults. The Hmong community reports that it's very difficult for them to report and appropriately address child sexual abuse due to culture. Thus, the abuse is concealed, subjecting the child and sometimes even the child's family to isolating them from support and services. The highest risk factors for child sexual abuse in a Hmong community are communal living, right? We talked about that multi-generational households. When a child goes to a relative's home for childcare, right? We often take our children to our Thai's house or our boss house, and within that household, there's a lot of people that live there. Intimate partner violence between caregivers. Cho nên chỉ是新到呢，tu niệm cho thả lông đâu là tu chỉ là thả lông đâu呢. Those are risk factors for child sexual abuse occurring in the home or to the child. Poverty, parental low education, cái này cái gì chỉ cần đâu này ạ. And then lack of open communication. Yeah, li bé hay nên mong này ạ, thọ bé thả cho cái quan hệ gì đó ra được cho này ạ, bé chỉ đó bé chấm nhiều, bé chỉ đó bé chấm nhiều thả cho tên đó này ạ. So, bé ơi ya. How can we prevent child sexual abuse in the Hmong community? Healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries make children less susceptible to child sexual abuse. A child that knows that their body belongs to them, who has been taught that they have rights, and have been told that they can tell grown-ups, no thank you, I don't want a hug, I don't want a kiss. They are less likely to be tricked into unwanted sexual touching. Now, what is boundary? Boundaries can be visible or invisible. An example of a visible boundary is the property our home sits on, from the front lawn to the backyard. The boundaries around your home belongs to you and your family and identifies what you are responsible for. The boundaries that we are talking about today are those that are invisible in our personal space. We each have an imaginary bubble around us. This includes children. Within our imaginary bubble is the personal space not only for our body, but our beliefs, thoughts, and feelings, and our opinions. Because boundaries often define ownership, it is important that boundaries are treated with care and respect. How do we teach children to have good boundaries? We create an open relationship. Establish and maintain an open and trusting relationship so that your child feels comfortable coming to you with anything. 如果你有想到個塔做來錢啊，你真差個那樣，你真差仔不個嘅你真差仔不你怎麼？就你啥係咧住個起學中咁long你係，個草木你個係到，只個咩咯個真係你個，我只個到要你啊我咯，只個係輪到我咯，佢做到起個學中你啊，佢做到結個對面有彈。他做來治療個就到假，你睇你真個寫那樣，係點頭點冇來治療呢？你真個人那個他。It's very important to teach children, and often, that there are no secrets between children and their parents. Respond with openness. Be aware of your reaction, including facial expression and tone of voice. Yeah,你俾我擰咗那樣，頭都。令到孩子都俾那樣，你頭俾攏只摸俾你知道係路俾知道地那樣，俾攏只摸到地了那樣，從你頭嗰對面有孩子的個係個只種聲那樣，嗰對面有曬個攏只摸上嚟都包呢，我有哋嗰對面有孩子咧知道都聲的個呢，你哋我咁冇講到誒，呢對面有冇咁到，呢對面有我陪的股咯，呢對咪酷我陪的股，嗰對住他係路嗰對面有曬個攏只摸上嚟都包係啲啊，嗰都聲了呢。So be aware of your reaction, including your facial expressions and tone of voice. Practice safe interactions. Children make mistakes. If they do, thank them for telling you. Okay, this is a big one. We as parents, Hmong parents, we have this thing where we want our children to be perfect. We expect our children to be mature and behave in a way that adults do, right? And so when they make a mistake, we scold them, we yell at them, we teach them. 特别就民有呢，就对了，我来去吵那样，不要知道去吵诶，莫了给诶，扩开了是那样。nhiều chủ tao oli bata của hai khi họ trâu nhiều chủ tao thì ô trâu mi tu có khe của hai tia có mù tao hôm na ấy có khi đây ấy có chủ tao có chỉnh cho cá mất tua này nhở ấy đây nhà lúc hôm na này nhở ô trâu có khe của tao cá nữa có mà khó khe có tụi mình nhở nè thì xin hai cái tụi mình nhở lon được cái tụi mình nhở tên nè của khi đây của chỉnh cho cá ấy nhà lúc hôm na ta ấy có chuyện mới có tụi mình nhở chè có chuyện mới nương tàu này nhở chỉ nên trai có chuyện thổ mua tế mình đã chi anh mua tế mình đã chi là nhiều chỉ cả khi con là nhiều mới dài được con này ạ thì có chúng tôi practice safe interaction có chúng tôi xiao nó có tụi mình nhiều nữa hay từ từ nữa đã chỉ chào là này nó nhiều lần nó có thả có những người hay này từ xí vấn đề cái hay này có yo hay ở chỗ đó nữa hay có cái hay lú rong hay lú rồi nữa này ạ yeah li bị chữ của tu này ạ thầu nếu mua nếu nó chính xác nè nếu của món tôi nếu nó nếu mua chính ta họ anh này ạ của đều cho coi mua chính ta liền này đấy nè của nhiều không mua chính xác số của thọ chính năng đâu à cái mà này ba cái tua thành đó của chính chế minh trí của sao được của tôi kinh minh trí đấy tôi giờ của tôi bao tơ đảm bảo nó này ạ của tôi chỉ của tôi sao mua nướng bờ này ạ tôi khó nướng mua cho mua ở chính ta này ạแต่是头女孩的年古有好么只相似诶，古陶子古八个，同那古路线可以见那样，诶古啥的古都看到哦哟，没都有我照个看过，好真的个因么只相似，好真的个我毛人穿的呢，都只要系的个草子我，老都只要的个都一零我是那样，年了年因我帮也打老天那样，的古线可以的古那里他。cái ưng mô cho mò tu ta cái ô li nói cho lời giàu cái nữa ô đã chỉ thảo cái nữa lọc khe của let children know that they're the boss of their bodies okay emphasize and create opportunities for them to understand they're in control of how they can interact with others and how others can interact with their body ask for permission before touching children and encourage them to do the same establish touching boundaries. We as parents, right? We just want to kiss. I have a kid. I have nieces and nephews. I just want to hold them and, hug them and kiss them. But I also understand that I need to teach them healthy boundaries. And so before I hug them and kiss them, I always ask, oh, can Auntie kiss you? Oh, can Auntie hug you? Is it okay for mom to give you a big hug right now? When I talk to my own son, my own child, granted, there are some times when I just, want to hug him, kiss him, and he always tells me, Mom, you need to ask me for my permission. But that's very healthy to establish those touching boundaries. We also like to tell our kid, right? Bye, Papa. Give Papa a hug. Right? Go to Grandma, give Grandma a hug. Kiss Tatay in your gone. Okay? We want to ask our kid for permission. Hey, you haven't seen Grandma for a long time. Do you think you want to give her a hug? Or better yet, we teach Grandma to ask for a hug. Right? Yeah. Có thể có chút bỏ mi tu nên đây, tôi có bỏ này cái tiệt, mi tu có bị cả bỏ hug có bị cả bỏ nhẹ có, là bỏ kiss có. So that we start teaching the generation above us to ask for permission because that's something that doesn't exist in their generation, right? Historically, children obey what the next elder person, even if it's an elder kid, say or do. And we want to change that. So we want to ask permission before we touch children and encourage them to do the same. We want to talk early on about body safety, right? As soon as your kid knows how to talk between ages 2 and 3, help them, teach them how to correctly identify body parts, right? We don't want to say, you know, your flower for a vagina or a vulva. We don't want to say a sword for a penis. We want to teach our children at the very early age when they start to talk and explore their bodies, right? What do we do with kids? What is this? Nose, look on June. Where's your eyes? Go look on Monet. Go look on Jane. Do we ever say, what about your vagina, your vulva? Eko jakko ne. Eko look ne. Eko look botu jokwa ne. Do we use those correct terms? We should be. Help them identify their body parts, the anatomically correct terms for them. Sexual development is just as important as physical, cognitive, and emotional development. So talking about sexual development, I talked to my kid when he was 9 years old about sexual development because, again, it's as healthy as talking about physical, cognitive, and emotional development. Keep discussions developmentally appropriate with an awareness of normal behaviors. It is very normal for kids to be curious, 5, 6-year-olds to be curious about their penises, their vulva, their nipples. Promote healthy sexuality. You don't want them to learn about sexual development or healthy sexuality from others. You want to teach them this. And this is something that culturally, 俾喺你講你又，俾轉頭俾咁又睇咗有錄嘅你又，咯我係的半年聽的經歷你又，咯睇咗係啲莫名有莫力嘅你又。We don't talk about that. Even 俾咗你就知 and 多人才都夠。舊影相咯，恁舊相，我就舊照相沒有我姊妹有8年了喲，0年0字就算到了都動彩彈了喲，係到這個我年紀中嘅，這個沒有沒有中嘅。It's okay when they are old enough. Again, keep the discussions developmentally appropriate. 有了包大了喲，那麼舊相舊一相，為什麼有啲前面講了喲？เรา是ใช้ TV เรา是ใช้ movie เรา是ใช้หนังนะยอเราบอกจริงๆป่ะเนี่ยชิ้นเนี่ยเราปูโอเคนะยอไม่有去多呢เรา去ใช้的哇เรา我领的要เราว่าจีนะยอเรา领的哦我家宝呢了你家宝了要手炸了ชิ้นเนี่ย我家宝了我爸老爸要不要哎呀这个去khó khăn đó là cho nó xả là bố cho kỹ nó cho là xả là mù bị chơi gần đó là mù mới tôi nên lâu rồi tôi khó khăn đó là cái xả cái có nhau nhẹ cái gì nè còn mà cái chủ tôi nhau tôi khe đó có tụi mình nhiều nhưng có tụi mình nhiều bỏ lên đó này chơi này bỏ thì ô cụ tôi nó cụ nhẹ cụ chỉ thả ta là đây nó cụ tôi bỏ là nhưng là tù là nó cụ thì ô mỗi cái đó câu nó cụ sai rồi chỉ là tao tao ô còn đâu cũng nó cũng nhẹ cũng chỉ thả ta là để chỉ okay chỉ bù nè, okay? Let children know that it's okay to ask for help and help them identify safe adults. This is very, very important, okay? Your child, do they know who they can go to ask for help? Or do you assume that you're it? Okay? If you don't have an open relationship with you, if you haven't had these conversations with them about, sexual development, cognitive development, like healthy physical development, all those things, are you that safe person for them? If you've never talked to them about these topics, what about your spouse, your partner? What about their grandparents? Educate children on vulnerable situations. Establish privacy rules at home and away from home, right? Like I have rules in my house about what it looks like. I have rules for my son at school when he goes to use the restroom with other boys his age or older or younger, because he's in he's in middle school now, but I've had rules since he was in elementary school. The doctor, I have rules when my son goes and see the doctor, even though I'm in the same room. The doctor knows to ask permission, and my son knows. He looks at me and he says, Mom, what do you think? When he goes to a relative's home, when he goes to a friend's home, there are rules. There's also rules for social media and online gaming. Okay? Because if he gets in a vulnerable situation, I want him to know, how does he protect himself? 特別他做街呢哟，伊個街呢好高路正呢哟，個點樣質地睇你都傾呢哟，個點樣不包嘅街呢正緊得，你質地睇你都傾，個包地頭個點樣唔喜歡拿嚟咪多呢哟，你冇就好拿只係用家好冇做事呢哟，要手你就只能嘅叫你我係多要得夠要叫你做事先呢哟，個冇乜街到個別到車就街到個多。แต่เรื่องก็มุจจีมันในอีป้ามีตู้จะจ้องนอยอยู่วันนี้ไอ้เจ้าแกมันแต่ตู้ท่าหมอเนี่ยเป็นยอดที่เคมีการเนาะมาเทนยอดที่เขาถึงเราไปอยู่ตัวจะซ้อนจริงหรือตู้ตาตาเนี่ยโอเคจะซ้อนใส่เดี๋ยวอ๋อเนี่ยตัวท่าหมอนี่ตัวหนึ่งจงก็พอถึงยอดไปที่เขาเนาะมัวจะท่าหมอเชฟเห็นเต้าเห็นเนาะโอเคก็ยงมันเต้าชาสิก็เห็นมัวเท่านั้นcái tụi nhiều bảo cho cha hay từ thằng mua sấy từ thăm mở qua những lúc chơi cái tụi nhiều chỉ bảo từ thăm mở này chỉ tao nông cái tụi nhiều cho cha để cái chỉ tao nông để cái tụi nhiều cả từ thăm mở sấy cái tụi nhiều lúc chơi cái tụi nhiều bảo lên đó rồi cái tụi nhiều muốn bảo lúc chơi muốn nói tụi phong lúc chơi này bảo cho cha để có một xí lúc hôm nay cái họ trong hơi để cái sao tao kể bài có một cho của cho gì cái mà hai lên thứ ba cái bắt đầu thả cho đây nó cái tụi mình nhỏ cái bắt đầu nó trở nên để nói thì cái tụi mình nhỏ muốn đỡ mù châu ít tu cái tí là nên cha cho lời rõ cái tụi mình nhỏ này cái bắt đầu nó tụi nên là để thả hay tiền cho cái một xíu hơn na cho của cho gì nhiều trong cái cả cho cái我还在这女生的家 and the most important man social media and online gaming. It's so important that you have that conversation with your child because it doesn't matter. It is the future now and will be the future, and it's our children's future. Okay, social media and online gaming. What kind of rules have you talked to your child about that? What does it look like? Okay, 頭嗰點有呢有，你擺到好你呢TikTok, Instagram, 你播你做 video YouTube。cho nên lời chỉ bảo này nhỏ mỗi cho nên phải pay thế nào and let's talk to them in you wanna nhỏ or online gaming you know they're chatting and gaming you know a rule we have in our house is for online gaming is our son he can play most of the time he's gaming with his friends but sometimes there are strangers that come in he does not have any headphones or anything he does not communicate with anyone he games with he'll have his cell phone on and he'll game with those friends that they'll do a group call. Educate them beyond stranger danger. Almost all children who are sexually abused know who their perpetrator are. And I know that I'm speaking a lot of Hmong because I just realized that I was not. And so I do speak Hmong and I do wish that one day I can do this training in Hmong. I think it's so important that the Hmong community has this education, be educated about child sexual abuse. 不過都市差呢有，有面有乜鬼有呢都能鬧呢有，因得俾喺你Hmong俾整你Hmong有啲前面間呢有，你只係一度nên sáng cháu này ít thuộc khoa nữa phình đau ní ít nên nhau hồi nhiều lúc chế nào nhiều chế nên kia này ạ cho kiểu bớt sáng ít đồ chỉ nên nhưng hạt tiệt nhưng tôi tôi thầu chế nhau lên chỉ kia nào cái chỉ bây giờ chúng tôi khoác kia nữa bây giờ lên nhẹ này ạ bây giờ nè tài cho bò này ạ bây giờ phao cho nè tài này ạ we have to teach our children how to protect themselves especially our daughters bây giờ tài này ạ okay we have to have that open relationship that trusting relationship with them and we have to talk about consent outside the context of sex you know but that go thả cho rất cái này ạ yeah, they tell bitch cho big nhiều đua done on Facebook now. We want to put our kids' picture on Facebook. Can we ask our child for consent? The funny thing is my son's always like, I don't consent you to cut my hair. Because I've talked to him about consent his whole life since he was 2. And he won't let me cut his hair. And he always says, I don't consent you to cut my hair. Okay. And it annoys me, but I'm very proud of my son because he's is the boss of his body. So be direct when talking about the anatomy of body parts. Think about it. Have you ever used the word vulva in Hmong to anyone? Right? Lúc bì, lúc bào, cái bắt đầu xí ý rau, hay là Hmong, cái hay bắt đầu đỏ, cái hay bắt đầu có từ cool, hay là có cho nè lùa nè lầu, nó có từ nữ. Có nè có hay bắt đầu, có bao cái như này có hay lo luôn nó bắt đầu cho là cái phong như này, có từ mình nhỏ này, có bao để xong tao nó nè. Last year I did this training in person here in Denver at Hmong Women Lead, and what I did was I passed out flashcards, and for the participants I asked them to write a body part in Hmong and English, anything, right? Let's say China, cái bọn này nó là Google là sao đấy ạ. So ý là lu Hmong it thà cho dùng lúc chế này ạ, là ý là ni finger tuần tí tơ lúc còn dâu khổ mùa, right? Your mouth, your eyes, your legs. No one wrote down any private parts. And then we got to the discussion of saying the words lúc bì, đắc âu. And almost, I think only one person said, I said that word in Hmong out loud and proud. And everyone else was like, ooh, you know, we can say it in English, but we haven't said it in Hmong. Research shows that children who know the proper term of their genital and anus are less vulnerable to abuse for 2 reasons. Knowing the anatomically correct names for their body parts increase their confidence and knowledge, removing the shame and secrecy around those body areas. Perpetrators often rely on a child's innocence, lack of knowledge, and discomfort about their private parts to take advantage of them. Second, knowing the correct names for their body parts gives them the language to report inappropriate behavior if they receive unwanted touch. If a child knows how to call their genital, penis, or vulva, lupi, right? They can communicate clearly if someone tries to touch them there. So the bitch tough funny the okay you bad them your detail to king for do almost a big chuffer out in Jongcha. Got to me your bow John Bay yonder the look gain the boat there no good look be no good that go the good look but to job war. Legit there all good call cho ra the she go chơ more or chơ more có từ nó có chơ warning lo what hay cha lay yo ít tầm nhiều lo đó cô there auntie tôi nói cô trái lệ tôi chỉ sai tên như thế tôi number tôi lấy tôi chỉ bảo này thì tôi tôi kia có gì mình nhỏ này cái là bảo này thế họ chẳng kinh giờ thì có cho một đôi này bảo rồi này bảo rồi mình cả này có chúng tôi kia này bảo thế có sao hay đó nữa thế thôi nếu muốn cho gì cả nữa cho 你穿嚟嚟緊呀，佢哋講你多你得高佢開個裝，都好多คนนะเองเดี๋ยวนู้นจะก่อนนี่ละเนี่ยนอนนี่ใจเดี๋ยวป้อตุ้งนอกก็กูได้เก่าอ่ะไอ้ป้อเต้าเต้าเกี่ยวนะอย่าอยู่จุด到只草么就路的，叫了我路早么路dài nè, OK, nó có biết tan thấu mua, vì không phải nè cũng mua cái chỉ nên có mua. It's important that every child, beginning from the age when they can speak, that they know, okay? So any child, every child, not any, every child. Từ từ là tôi bắt bảo hai lù nè yo, mới all big young, 2 to 3 years old. Lỡ chủ tao tao nè, lỡ chủ tao bảo nè, okay? They have to know that their body belongs to them. They can tell anyone no if they do not want to hug or kiss. They have to know that they are the boss of their body and what they say about their body goes. Nếu tụi mình nhớ chỉ xa có là tụi mỗi lần nghe là có là nó, nếu mà cho chạy là cho no, chỉ cả nó cái chủ tao lên dài, thì only. Their private parts are those that are covered by their swimsuit. Okay, their vagina, their breast, their buttocks, anus. It's protected by, those are areas that are covered, by their swimsuit. And they always use the correct names for their body parts, for those private parts, right? The penis, dakao. The vulva, lupi, lupao. Breast, right? You all me. Correctly labeling their private parts are not funny or weird. Everyone has them. No one can touch their private parts, and no one can ask them to touch theirs. They have to know, okay, the child. In this family, we never keep secrets, especially about body parts. And lastly, they know at least 3 people that they can talk to if they ever feel scared or nervous, especially about body safety. If someone breaks the rules, they always tell someone who can help them. They need to know that even if they are too scared, it's never too late to tell, and they will never be in trouble. Let me ask you, have you had a body safety conversation with your child? What are your family's body safety rules in your household?
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the Hmong Woman Lead Summit. I'm honored to be here today. My name is Sandra Yang, and I'm excited to dive into our session today, Mental Health and Medication Use in the Hmong Community. I'd like to just take a few minutes to briefly introduce myself before we dive into the topic. I'm a trained pharmacist with residency experience and close to a decade of work in both the clinical and academic pharmacy field. I have over years of experience that I've developed in medical communication and medical information, working at the intersection of both science, education, and patient care within the pharmaceutical industry. And beyond my professional role, I'm very committed to advancing health education and addressing social determinants of health, especially within minority and underrepresented communities. And this passion has led me to focus on Asian American population, particularly the Hmong and Southeast Asian communities. I'm also the co-founder and current president of the North Carolina Hmong Women Association, where I've had the privilege of working alongside many incredible Hmong leaders to promote health equity, support initiatives, and drive community-centered development. And at the heart of my work is really truly a commitment to reducing stigma and increase access to culturally and linguistically appropriate care so that no one feels alone, unheard, or misunderstood when it comes to their health and well being. So I'm honored to share this space with you all today as we talk more about mental health and the important role medications can play in supporting our community's healing and growth. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to share an important disclaimer. So, this presentation is really intended for educational purposes only. While we'll be discussing mental health and medication use, the information shared today is not meant to replace any professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you or someone you know is facing any type of mental health challenge, I would strongly encourage you to speak with a qualified healthcare provider or mental health professional. And please don't rely solely on the contents of this presentation to make any decisions about your health or delay seeking the appropriate support you need. Every individual situation is unique and personalized care is essential. So I thank you for your understanding. And with that, let's begin. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering in today's presentation. Our goal is to explore key topics that impact mental health care in our Hmong community. To mental health providers attending this session, this may be a review for you all. And for our community members joining us for this session, this is really about bringing awareness so that you can be more knowledgeable about the various options that's available for you. So, first of all, we'll explore the mental health challenges that many Hmong individuals and families face, including cultural barriers to care. Next, we'll address common concerns and misconceptions about mental health, medications, because we know that fear, um, misunderstandings, and stigma often keep people away from getting the help that they truly need. We'll then review some of the most common mental health medications that are used to provide a better understanding of these medications, what they do, and how they can support recovery. And then finally, we'll briefly discuss ways to support culturally respective care, approaches that really honor our identity, values, and traditions while also making space for healing and support within our community. So, with that, we'll go ahead and get started here. Before going further, I wanted to also just include some of the definitions just so that we're all on the same page on what some of these terms mean. So, the first one here is stigma, and stigma refers to the negative social attitudes that's attached to a certain trait or condition, like mental illness. It's often seen as a deficiency or something to be ashamed of, and it can lead to silence, shame, and avoidance for care. And misconception. So, a misconception is a wrong or inaccurate idea, something we believe to be true, but it really isn't. Misconceptions about mental illnesses or medications often come from fear, lack of information, or even generational beliefs that's passed down, that goes without being questioned. And finally, a stereotype is a set of generalizations about a group of people, such as assuming that all Hmong individuals respond the same way to stress, or that mental health issues only affect or impact certain types of people. So these stereotypes can limit our understanding and create barriers to individualized care. So all of these definitions really help us to recognize the forces that shape attitudes and beliefs and allow us to challenge them with empathy, with knowledge, and compassion. Our next definition here is medication. So, in general, a medication is any drug, whether it's prescribed or you can buy them and purchase them over the counter. Medications, they help treat an illness, a disease, a disorder, or a condition. It can be something as common as aspirin for a headache or even insulin, which helps treat diabetes. So, when it comes to mental health, medications are usually prescription drugs that have psychoactive effects, meaning they influence the brain and behavior. And these therapeutic agents are designed to help manage symptoms of conditions like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and other conditions. So now let's look at the definition of psychiatric medications, or they're also known as psychoactive drugs. And a psychoactive drug is really any substance that significantly affects how we think, perceive, or feel. And these drugs interact with the brain and can change mood, awareness, our behaviors, and even our mental functioning. They can include substances that are intentionally used to alter the consciousness, but they can also include therapeutic medications that are used to treat mental health conditions. And these can include antidepressants, mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, sedatives, and others. You may also, again, hear them referred to or called as psychotropic drugs, um, or just plainly psychotropics or psychiatric medications. While the names of them may vary, they all still refer to medications that impact or affect the mind and are used to support mental health. So, understanding this really helps us to see these medications not as something to fear or even avoid, but as carefully prescribed tools, just like medications for any other health conditions. Let's take a moment here to really talk about like what is mental health, right? So mental health is more than just the absence of types of illnesses. It really also includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, even how we act and how we manage stress, how we build and interact with our relationships and make decisions in our everyday life. Just like physical health, mental health is shaped by many factors. So these can include factors such as biological influences, like our genes or brain chemistry, as well as life experiences such as trauma or abuse, or even our family history of mental health conditions can also play a role. And this isn't rare. So, more than 1 in 5 adults in the US live with a mental illness. That's nearly 58 million people, and this is based on data from 2021. So, when we talk about mental health, right, we're talking about something that basically impacts almost every family, impacts every community, and very likely even someone that you know or love. So that's why it's very important for us to create understanding, reduce stigma, and really make space for support and healing within our community. So now looking more closely at the AAPI, or Asian American Pacific Islander community, here we have some statistics. So it's estimated that 2.7 million AAPI individuals live with a mental health or substance abuse disorder. Despite this, AAPIs are the least likely to seek mental health services compared to any other racial or ethnic group. And in fact, Asian Americans are 3 times less likely to access mental health care than white individuals. And when we're looking on our youth, among youth, the impact is also like alarming. In 2017, suicide was a leading cause of death for AAPI individuals between the ages of 15 to 24, pointing to a silent crisis often hidden by stigma and lack of culturally appropriate support. When we narrow in on Southeast Asian refugees, the data reveals even more concern. Many in this population experience mental health challenges linked to immigration and trauma. About 70% of Southeast Asian refugees who receive mental health care are diagnosed with PTSD, and this is often related to war, displacement, or resettlement stress. And these numbers, they aren't just statistics, they represent real people, real families, and real pain. And they remind us why it's so critical to have open conversations, to break down the stigma and advocate for care that really understands and respect our lived experiences. And then focusing on the Hmong community, it's important to acknowledge that mental health data is still limited, especially when it comes to our Hmong women population. There's a real gap in research, resources, and culturally relevant services, and even that the lack of visibility can lead to unmet needs and continued stigma within our community. So what we do know, what we do know is that the Hmong community is least is at least twice as likely as the general US population to experience some form of mental health issue. So conditions like major depression, PTSD, and anxiety disorders are particularly common. And again, they're often tied to the experiences of trauma, displacement, and cultural stress with resettlement. But these struggles are often unspoken, right? Cultural beliefs, language barriers, even the fear of shame or judgment can prevent people from our community from seeking help or even talking about it. This is why I think like just raising awareness, expanding on our culturally sensitive care, and simply opening the conversation and starting that dialogue like we're doing today is so important for our community's healing and for our future. One of the most comprehensive studies that we have on Hmong mental health comes from a 2010 Wilder Foundation assessment. So, according to them, and their findings, between 40 to 85% of Hmong adults and adolescents have experienced some form of mental health issue. That's significantly higher than 20 to 26% seen in the general US population. These high rates are often linked, again, like we've been saying, to drama of war, forced migration, and the ongoing stress of adapting to a new culture, language, and societal expectations. The most commonly reported mental health condition in the Hmong community include major depression, reported in 15% to as high as 75% of participants, generalized anxiety disorder seen in 35 to 45, and post traumatic stress disorder or PTSD ranging from 15 to 35%. In addition to those, the study also identifies schizophrenia, delusional disorders, acculturation stress, defiant behavior in youth, and suicidal thoughts as prevalent concerns. So, this data highlights a serious need for culturally informed care and greater mental health awareness within our own community, especially as many of these issues remain really invisible and not really talked about. One of the biggest barriers to mental health care in the Hmong community is stigma. So, in many Hmong families, it's considered shameful to admit to having some type of like mental health condition or mental health issues. And mental health illness is often seen as like a personal weakness or some type of spiritual issue or concern or something that brings dishonor to a family when talked about. And as a result, many people don't talk about it. They suffer in silence rather than trying to find help and support. The 2010 Wilder research study confirmed that mental health stigma is still really deeply rooted in the Hmong community. And this stigma can prevent individuals from even talking about their struggles, let alone, trying to access professional support. For many, acknowledging mental illness means that they're admitting that there's something wrong with them or that they failed in some way. But in reality, seeking help and acting, making an act to seek support is an act of courage and not really a weakness. If we want to improve mental health outcomes, we must start by changing the narrative, by creating safe spaces for honest conversations, and by reminding our community that mental health is overall health, right? Having space like the Hmong Woman Lead Summit is helping lead that conversation and share information for our community. We know that many individuals in the Hmong community continue to rely on traditional cultural beliefs and particularly shamanism as a way to, as a primary source for mental health support. And I think shamans, in a way, are viewed as spiritual healers where they can really help restore this balance and address emotional, psychological distress through like different types of ritual practices. Another traditional route that the Hmong community still heavily relies on is herbal medicine, and most often they're used for more of the physical health conditions such as gastrointestinal issues, the common cold, and chronic diseases such as hypertension or even diabetes. However, it's not very well documented where I could find whether herbal remedies or herbal medicine are really used specifically to address mental health conditions within our community. These traditional approaches reflect a culturally rooted understanding of health and healing. And for some, this may be the only form that they trust and have access to. So I think it's really important that we as a community recognize that, but then try to find ways where we can get them evidence based therapies and options as well. So while traditional healing practices are important, it's also very helpful to understand the range of conventional treatment options that are evidence based and available to support mental health and overall well being. And there are many tools that can improve the experience on the road to wellness. And these can often be used together. These tools include medications, they include therapy or counseling. Also, social support is very important. And then education, just being aware of what's out there and what types of supports is available. Again, therapy can take many forms, from just learning relaxation or coping skills to more intensive approaches that can help reframe negative thinking patterns, or healing or trauma. Social support can include like acceptance, encouragement, and even connection with family, friends, and the community can be very powerful on the road to recovery. So simply feeling understood and supported can make a meaningful difference in the lives. And education. So learning about like mental health conditions, how to manage them alongside other health issues that an individual may have, can really empower individuals with the skills and confidence to move forward. And again, medication is just one part of this. So for some, medications help manage symptoms and stabilize mood, allowing individuals to better engage in other areas of their life and even treatment. So each person, their journey is very unique to them, and combining tools can really create a personalized path toward recovering, healing, and wellness. One of the significant barriers to mental health care in the Hmong community, including Hmong women, is the presence of misconceptions around use of medication. So many individuals still hold the belief that taking medications for mental health conditions means that they're not trying hard enough. They just need to think more positively. They just need to feel better. But these views are deeply rooted in our cultural values around like the strength and resilience of our community through time because of all of the wars and traumas that our community went through. There's also a misconception that taking medication is a sign of weakness. It's like an easy way out, right? But that's really not true because it's really just like taking medications for high blood pressure or diabetes, right? Those conditions need to be managed with medications. So it's really important to just realize that taking medications for mental health is not, it's not about giving up. It's about taking control, um, and it's about um, having the tools necessary so that you or the individual can manage their symptoms and really begin that healing process. So, challenging these misconceptions is essential if we want to ensure that individuals in our community receive the passionate and evidence based care that they deserve. So let's continue to discuss some of the misconceptions again with medication use on the next few slides. So the first one here is people will judge me if I take medication for my mental illness. So this fear of judgment is really real for a lot of people, and it's something that prevents individuals, including those in the Hmong community, from seeking the help that they need. The idea that psychiatric medication is something to be ashamed of can lead to silencing them, continuing their suffering, and continuing their condition to be untreated. But the truth is that using psychiatric medication is a legitimate and responsible and proactive way to manage mental health. Just like someone, again, like taking medication for other types of conditions, even like asthma or diabetes, people with mental health condition deserve that treatment and support without being shamed. And millions of people around the world take psychiatric medications and go on to live healthy, meaningful, and successful lives. And it's really not a weakness, but it's really a step that they take toward wellness and getting the help that they need. So while stigma does still exist, I think we must continue to challenge it and be open about speaking about it and supporting one another to get the help that they need. So, misconception number two, getting help for mental illness symptoms is a sign of personal weakness or lack of willpower. Again, it kind of blends into that first misconception, but this is really harmful because, and this misconception is not only within our Hmong community, but is really across all communities, and all communities struggle with this. But there's often this assumption that if you need medication or therapy, or there must be something wrong with you or who you are, that maybe you're just not trying hard enough. But that's really far from the truth, right? Mental health conditions are real. They're real medical issues, just like heart disease. They're not because someone's lazy or they're weak or they don't have that. They're not putting in the effort. Um, these are real conditions and they need to be treated, right? So, whether you're seeking help or treatment through medications or therapy or other types of support, it's not a sign of weakness. It's really a strength, really, because it takes courage to acknowledge that, hey, I need help and I need support. And I need to get on the road to healing and recovery. Um, so needing help, it really doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or anything like that, or that you're weak. It simply means that you're doing what's necessary to care for yourself and your future, and you should be proud of that. Misconception number three is psychiatric medication will change who I am as a person. This is a common concern for a lot of people, especially adolescents and young adults, right? Who might worry that taking this medication will impact or affect their personality, their identity, or who they are, their sense of self. The truth is that psychiatric medication is not designed to change who you are as a person. They're really meant to help supplement and manage the symptoms of mental illness, like persistent sadness, anxiety, or mood swings, so that you can function more fully and feel more like yourself. Rather than changing your personality, the goals of these types of medications is to restore a sense of balance and improve your overall quality of life. And in fact, many people who begin treatment say things like, I'm finally feeling like myself again, right? So remember, medication isn't becoming someone else or taking away from who you are. It's about supporting your mental health so that you can live a life that has more clarity and more more confidence and be more connected with who you are. The fourth misconception is psychiatric medication can destroy a healthy brain. Again, it's a fear that many people have. It's the belief that psychiatric medication somehow like can damage the brain or can alter the brain in some way, and that it's harmful. Um, but psychiatric medication is not designed to destroy or harm the brain. In fact, it works just like other medications that we take. So, ibuprofen works to help relieve headaches, right? And insulin helps diabetics to manage their diabetes. Antibiotics are used to help fight infections. So, psychiatric medications are helped to manage mental health symptoms such as depression, anxiety. So, individuals can feel more stable and have a better functioning for their daily life. Um, so, it's important that we trust that when prescribed appropriately, and taken under medical supervision, that psychiatric medications is safe and effective and part of a mental health treatment as well. So let's go on to the next misconception. The side effects of psychiatric medications are worse than their original symptoms. So this concern is understandable. Like other medications, psychiatric medications can cause side effects, and those experiences can be frustrating, right? Or even discouraging at times. However, it's important to know that side effects do not mean the medication isn't working or that it's worse than the condition it's treating. Medications often target the and to address specific symptoms, and finding the right medication or even the right dose can take time to make the necessary adjustments and switches. Not everyone will experience the same side effects, and for many, the benefits of improved mood, reduced anxiety, or stabilized emotions far outweighs the temporary discomforts of some of the side effects of the medications. Again, it's very important to have an open communication with your doctor. If you're experiencing side effects that impact your daily life, don't hesitate to speak up and share that with your doctor. And your doctor or your healthcare provider can work with you to make adjustments, to change the dosage, to switch up the medications and explore other treatment options with you. So again, you don't have to suffer in silence. Just being honest about how you feel can help you advocate for yourself and make that conversation with your provider so that there could be a personalized treatment plan to help support your mental health and well-being. Misconception number 6: medication should make me feel better right away. This is a very common expectation that as soon as you take a medicine, it should work right away. But that's not the case. It's not how psychiatric medications work. So, unlike medications like pain relievers, which can provide like a fast relief, psychiatric medications work more on a cellular level, affecting neurochemicals, which is chemicals within our brain. And these changes happen at the central nervous system level. So it takes time to develop, and it takes time for an individual to actually feel the effects of the medication. So, for example, antidepressants or anti anxiety medications can take anywhere up to 2 to 4 weeks, maybe even sometimes longer, to have the full therapeutic effects. And this really means that patience and persistence are key. I know that it can be discouraging at times when you don't feel that immediate relief, but really sticking through with the plan gives the medication time to do its job. Again, if there's always any concerns you have or questions you have, please, openly talk with your healthcare provider so that they're aware and they can work with you through this. So, when it comes to mental health, it's important to remember that every individual situation is unique. There are many factors to consider before starting medications, and those decisions should always be made in collaboration with your trusted healthcare provider. Some situations where it may be time or when you should start thinking about having that conversation with your provider include if there is ongoing or worsening symptoms over time. And this can include physical signs like fatigue, just feeling tired, changes in your appetite, or even, having a hard time going to sleep. Another one is suicidal thoughts or feelings that um, have become more frequent or more intense than usual. And then experiencing hallucinations, such as hearing or seeing things that others don't, or simply just feeling like your symptoms are interfering with your life, your relationships, and your ability to function. It's important to understand that, again, there is no one size fits all medication, and the best treatment for you will depend on a lot of parameters. Your specific symptoms, your medical history, how your body responds to the different types of medication, and also having that conversation with your provider, even as you're going through this process of, hey, I might consider medications to help me with the symptoms um, or keeping them updated with the different side effects. So let's take a closer look at medications used in mental health treatment. Again, these are known as psychoactive drugs or psychiatric medications, and these medications have a significant effect on psychological processes, which include how we think, how we feel, how we perceive things, and how we respond to our environment. They're often used to help manage conditions like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. It's important to understand that psychiatric medications don't cure the illness, but they can greatly reduce symptoms, making daily life more manageable and improving overall just the quality of life. In many cases, medications can also help enhance the effectiveness of other treatments, so such as therapy or counseling, by creating more of like a emotional stability that's needed to engage more fully in these types of approaches. And when used appropriately under medical supervision, these medications can be a very powerful tool um, on the journey toward recovery and just mental wellness. So, how do these psychoactive drugs actually work? So, these medications alter the brain function by impacting the way neurotransmitters in the brain, which are brain chemical messengers, right? How they work. They typically act in one of the two ways. So, either by changing the availability of the neurotransmitters at the synapses. And the synapses is the space between nerve cells. And this is where all of the communication occurs. They can also interact directly with neurotransmitter receptors, either stimulating or blocking them. So this can help like regulate mood, can impact perception and even behaviors. So, in other words, psychoactive drugs help restore chemical balance in the brain, which can reduce symptoms. This process takes time, and the effects may vary from person to person, but just understanding how that these medications work helps really us see that they are scientifically grounded, so they're evidence based, right? And these are tools are really designed to support brain health and emotional well being. So let's review some of the most common types of psychiatric medications used to treat mental health disorders and what they're typically prescribed for. So, first here we have antidepressants, and these are primarily used to treat depression, but they're also effective for like anxiety, chronic pain, and insomnia in some cases. It's important to know that antidepressants they don't work immediately, so they usually take anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to show their full effects. And interestingly, some symptoms like sleep, appetite, energy, and even concentration, they may improve before the mood starts to lift. So it's important to stick with the medications as prescribed and give time for it to work. And then next, we have anti anxiety medications, and these are used to help manage symptoms such as panic attacks, um, extreme worry or fear. And the two more common ones are benzodiazepines, which are fast acting. They're used only really for short time, for short term, and they help with severe anxiety and panic attacks. And then buspirone, which is designed for a longer treatment management of anxiety, and they have a lower risk of dependence as well. So these are just two types. There's a lot of other types of anti-anxiety medications, but these medications can be very effective when used appropriately and often combined with therapy and other support to create more of a comprehensive treatment plan. We also have another class of medications called antipsychotics. So these are primarily used to treat psychosis or a condition where a person might experience a loss of contact with reality. The symptoms can be delusions or hallucinations, and antipsychotics may also be prescribed along other medications to help manage these symptoms of even delirium, dementia, or other mental health conditions. Um, and it's important again to note that the full therapeutic effects of antipsychotic medications can take up to 6 weeks. So that's a pretty long time. Um, and like many psychiatric medications, they require close monitoring to ensure that they're working effectively. So they also have side effects that, if you experience, you have to, it's recommended that you speak with your healthcare provider just to make sure they're aware so that they can switch things around for you to ensure that you're getting the best therapy. Again, these medications can be life changing for individuals who have conditions like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So, next we have mood stabilizers. They're another important category of psychiatric medications, and they're mainly used to treat bipolar disorder, especially where individuals experience mania and depression. So, those manias are the highs, and the depressions are kind of like the lows. They help balance mood swings and prevent changes in the mood or behavior. And these medications may be used to manage mood associated with other mental health conditions as well. Again, these mood stabilizers can be combined with other medications like antidepressants to create a more effective treatment plan that's tailored to individuals. So, the stigma surrounding mental illness, especially in the Hmong community, can definitely feel overwhelming, but it's important that we don't let stigma stand in the way of getting the care and support that individuals need and that they deserve. So, there is absolutely no shame in needing or taking medications for your mental health. Just like we take medications for other physical conditions, mental health treatment is a responsible and courageous step towards healing. In fact, I think seeking help is something to be proud of, right? It takes strength to speak out and reach out to people and to take care of yourself, especially when it goes against cultural expectations, right? And there's fear and stigma around it. I believe everyone deserves to feel good, to feel whole, and to live a fulfilling life. And so, really, if you're experiencing mental health challenges or issues or anything, like, you're not alone, and your well-being really matters, right? And so we as a community need to come together to really address those. And as we move forward, right, I really encourage all of us, both within our Hmong community and those outside our community who are advocates and allies, to continue promoting mental health care that is culturally respectful and relevant, and creating safe spaces to talk openly about our mental health without fear or shame is really important. And then encouraging one another to really seek support, whether that be through family, friends, therapists, support groups, or other mental health care professionals is really important. And listening without judgment and taking time to really understand the cultural context of our Hmong community, our belief system, and our experiences, right, and our history is important to the overall care for mental health issues and conditions. And also, while respecting traditional practices, but advocating for evidence based treatment options is really important. And using sensitive and inclusive language, whether we're communicating in Hmong or in English, is also important. And then building that trust through relationships, through storytelling, and just having the heart for compassion, I think is really important as we really support one another, and help others support us, in culturally respectful and relevant approaches to mental health, right? And for those of you working in the mental health field already, you can probably add to this list of ways that we can encourage culturally appropriate mental health care for our community. Um, and really, together, we can bridge this cultural understanding and ensure that everyone in our community that needs the help, regardless, um, feels like they're supported, they're respected, and they're empowered on this journey, that hopefully that they take to their mental wellness and well-being. So, with that, thank you all so much for being here and engaging in this conversation about mental health and medication use in the Hmong community. If you'd like to continue that conversation, ask questions, or even collaborate on projects or in any way to improve care in our Hmong community, please don't hesitate to reach out. I have listed here my email and also my website as well. And again, I deeply appreciate your presence, your commitment to wellness. And I truly believe that together we can really reduce stigma, create culturally responsive care, and uplift the health of our community, really one conversation at a time. So thank you, and Ochona.
Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Jamie Lore, and I am honored to have this space with you today. Whether you're joining us live or tuning in from afar, thank you for showing up, because showing up is the first act of resilience. Today's session is titled Rooted in Resilience, Leading from Lived Experience to Create Systemic Change. We'll explore what it means to lead not just from a place of perfection, but from a place of truth, from the stories that we carry, from the struggles we've survived, from the silence we've broken. This is a space where we acknowledge that real change doesn't always start in institutions. It often starts in kitchens, in circles, in whispered conversations, and in the courage of those who've lived through what systems failed to see. So I invite you to take a deep breath, get grounded, and lean in, not just with your mind, but with your heart. So welcome to a journey of healing, leadership, and collective power. Before we dive deeper into today's conversation, I want to begin with a grounding reflection. Our stories are seeds. In the right soil, they grow into systems of change. Sit with that for just a moment. Each of us carries stories, some shaped by love, others by loss. Some were inherited, passed down in fragments or silence. Others were carved out by fire, by survival, by sheer will to continue. These stories live in our bones, in our names, in the pauses between our words, and so often they're kept quiet, not because they lack power, but probably because the world doesn't know how to hold them just quite yet. But what if we did? What if we created spaces not to extract or perform, but to witness, to honor, and to water these stories with care? In those spaces, stories stop being burdens They become blueprints. They become roots for collective healing. They become sparks that light the path toward justice. Because when we speak our truths, especially the hard ones, we're not just recounting the past, we are reimagining the future. So today, I invite you to think of your story, not just as a memory or a moment that happened to you, but as a seed with the potential to grow into something greater. You never know who will be nourished by the roots you lay down, and you will never know whose silence will be broken because you chose to speak. And you never know what systems might begin to bend because you dared to lead with truth. That's the truth of being rooted in resilience. That's the beginning of real change. So let's go ahead and walk this journey together, story by story, root by root. I want to go ahead and start off by talking about why lived experiences matters, not as a buzzword or a checkbox, but as a blueprint, a roadmap, a sacred record of what's been endured, what's been overcome, and what still needs to change. Take a moment to reflect. What's something you know deeply, not because you were taught it, but because you lived it? That's the kind of knowledge I'm lifting up today. In many systems, education, healthcare, mental health, public policy, what's considered expertise often comes from credentials, from degrees, titles, publications, or proximity to power. But credibility shouldn't be confused with proximity to pain. Those who have walked through hardship, through loss, injustice, trauma, survival, uh, they carry insights that are often more honest, more grounded, and more effective than anything written in a manual. The problem has never been a lack of solutions. The problem is that people with lived experience haven't always been seen as solution makers. Or worse, we've been invited into the room not only to be asked to leave parts of ourselves at the door, our pain, our healing, our boundaries, our questions, our instincts. So I want to be clear. Lived experience is a form of expertise. It's not hypothetical, it's not theoretical, it's forged in real life, in sleepless nights, in broken systems. And the moment someone said, "You're on your own," and you still found a way forward. As a global mental health peer network reminds us, lived experiences, unique and in depth perspectives are the catalyst for change and transformation of all societal systems. And that's just not an ideal, it's already happening. Peer-led mental health programs, survivor-informed policy efforts, trauma-informed education models, all of these were pioneered by people who didn't learn about the problem in a textbook, but survived it. Now, I want to bring in a story that had stayed with me for a little while, Dr. Paul Farmer's legacy. So it's, to me, it's a testament to the power of lived experience. So Dr. Farmer didn't just treat illnesses, he treated the systems that made people sick as well. In Haiti and beyond, Dr. Farmer built a model of care rooted in presence, trust, and radical empathy. He believed that the poor deserve the same quality of care as the wealthy, and he backed it up by walking with people, sitting with their stories, and building new systems from what he learned on the ground. He didn't lead from a distance, he led from alongside. So his ethic of accompaniment, of staying with someone through their suffering, without rushing to fix or bypass, was born not just of clinical training, but of deep observation, humility, and experience. And here's what's powerful. Dr. Farmer didn't wait for institutions to validate his approach. He built new ones. And that's the invitation to us as well, to build and reshape systems from what we know, deeply, personally, and unapologetically, to center our truths even though they're messy, to trust our perspectives even if it's been ignored. So ask yourself, what if your lived experience is not just valid, but also vital? When we lead from lived experiences, something shifts. Our stories become strategy, our insight becomes infrastructure, and our survival becomes a pathway for others. System starts to make sense because they're being shaped by those who've had to navigate their failures. And most importantly, trust gets rebuilt. That's why we can't just listen to lived experience. We must believe it. We must invest in it. We must follow it. Because transformation doesn't begin with theory. It begins with testimony. It begins with those who walked through the hardest things and chose to return with light in their hands for others. So when I say that lived experience is a kind of expertise, I'm also saying this. The fact that you're still here is that testimony. The stories you carry are not just meaningful, they're evidence, they're data of what needs to change and of what's possible when people are given the tools, the trust, and the space to lead. But that leadership isn't born in a vacuum, it's born in resilience. And when I talk about resilience, I want to be clear. I don't mean just bouncing back. I don't mean returning to normal after something hard, because for many of us, normal wasn't safe. Normal wasn't kind. Normal wasn't built for some of us in the first place. True resilience isn't about pretending we were changed by what we went through. It's about moving forward because of it, with it. It's about carrying what we've survived and using it to shape how we lead, how we serve, how we show up when others can't. For me, resilience isn't a straight line. It's messy, it's nonlinear. It's like taking a step forward and then hiding under the covers the next day. It's like breaking down before breaking through. But through it all, I've learned this. Resilience at its core is a form of memory. It remembers the things I try to forget. It remembers what tried to break me. It remembers the silence I endured, the systems that failed me, the nights I whispered, I can't do this, and still woke up anyway. And then it transforms that memory into fuel, into empathy, into conviction, into clarity, into leadership that doesn't know what's needed, but feels it in its bones. And I want to ask you something. What is something that you carry that others can't see, but that has made you stronger? That is your resilience. That is your power. Every one of us has moments we thought we wouldn't survive, but we did. And moments, they're just not personal, but they're portable. We carry them into boardrooms, into healing spaces, into policy decisions, classrooms, and kitchen tables. We carry them into every hard conversation we've been told we don't belong in and change the room just by standing in it. When I root my work in that type of and kind of resilience, I'm not just building programs or checking off outcomes. I'm building something ancestral, something future facing, something others can stand on when they're not sure that they can stand at all. I'm building a movement, one rooted not just in hope, but in proof, because I am that proof, and so are you. And when people talk about lived experiences, when I talk about lived experiences, there's an assumption that it has to be shared out loud, right? That to be valid, it must be verbal, that to be powerful, it must be public. But there's also a truth that I've come to understand through my own journey that I want to share today with you, which is lived experience is not only what you share, it's about what you know and how that knowing shapes what you do. Now, I've shared parts of my story, parts that I've healed, integrated, and offered to others with love and care. And I've held back other parts, not because I'm hiding, but because I'm honoring the parts of me that are still healing, that are still tender. You see, there were times when I spoke constantly. I was facilitating meetings, supporting others, leading community efforts, and yet with all that talking, I wasn't really actually saying the things that were heavy on my heart. I realize now that sometimes our loudest seasons are also our most silenced ones. I was speaking around the truth because the truth was still forming inside me. That too is a lived experience, because lived experience is not just about what I've survived, it's about what that survival taught me. It's in the way I instinctively notice when someone is uncomfortable in a room. It's in the way I slow down before making a decision that impacts others. It's in the spaces I build where people don't have to perform to feel safe. Even when I'm not telling the story is still working through me. That is strategy. Living experience becomes leadership, not when we disclose it, but when we apply it. When we let it guide how we build, how we protect others, how we redesign systems so people don't have to go through what we did. My experience lives in the way I advocate, in the way I write grants, in the way I process conversations, facilitate communication, in the way I hold space. That is leadership, and that is enough. I don't need to narrate every scar to prove that I've lived through something, and neither do you. Some stories are meant to be shared, others are meant to be safeguarded, and both are powerful. So if you're holding on to something that you haven't named yet, I want you to know it still counts. You don't owe anyone your story in order to lead from it. Just showing up with intention and integrity, rooted in what you've lived through, is revolutionary. That's how I've learned to lead, not just from what I say, but from what I carry. That's what turns silence into strategy. That's what transforms lived experience into collective strength. And that's where movement really begins, not in spectacle, but in presence, in knowing, in choosing to lead from what you've lived, whether or not anyone ever hears the details. So, what does real systemic change actually look like when it's led by people with lived experience? Let me go ahead and start with this. It's not just about giving someone with a powerful story a seat at the table. It's about changing the table itself. Too often, systems, whether it's healthcare, education, mental health, nonprofits, or policy, were created without listening to the people they were meant to serve. Maybe you've been in one of those systems. Maybe you've been hurt by them, overlooked by them, or exhausted from trying to navigate them. I have. And I know what it feels like to walk into a room that wasn't made for you, to speak and not be heard, to be asked to share your experience, but not have any of it turn into real action. That's why I say lived experience is not just a story, it's a strategy. Everything I've had to figure out on my own, every time I had to fill a gap, that system left open, every barrier I faced to just survive, all of that taught me how to build differently. And that's where change really does come from, right? From the people who lived the failures of a system and still showed up to fix it. And here's what change actually looks like it means including people with lived experience in every part of decision making, not just at the bottom as clients or participants, but maybe even at the top as leaders. It means shifting resources and funding toward what communities actually need based on what people have lived through, not just what looks good on paper. It means designing programs and policies that start with trust, cultural understanding, and dignity, not red tape, paperwork, or assumptions. And it means training professionals to listen differently, to value real experience just as much as formal education or titles. And it means being brave enough to end things that don't work anymore, even if they've been around for a long time. So, yes, we need more seats at the table, but we also need to change who sets the agenda, who writes the budget, and who defines success. Because people with lived experience know what change really takes. We don't need someone else to speak for us. We are already experts. Experts in surviving, experts in creating workarounds, experts in seeing what's broken and imagining what could be better. And no, we're not just asking to be included in systems that were never made for us. We're here to reimagine them, rooted in experience, shaped by truth, and designed for dignity for all of us. After strategy, I do want us to go ahead and come back to relationship because strategy without trust becomes performance, and systems without people becomes walls. If I've learned anything from My lived experience, my work, it's that community is where change actually lives, but not the kind of community that's built on networking or titles. I'm talking about the kind that's built on truth. It's been in rooms where people talked a lot about equity, but no one told the truth. I've also been in small circles, no budget, no agenda, where someone's story cracked open healing that no professional could have planned. That's what truth does, right? It opens, it connects, it heals. But truth without self accountability is also just noise. So building real community actually means asking ourselves, am I showing up in the way I want others to show up for me? Am I leading with curiosity or judgment? Am I creating safety or control? Accountability isn't about blame, it's about commitment. Commitment to doing better with what we know now. I've had to be honest about the ways I've unintentionally held up the very systems I was trying to change by staying silent, by avoiding hard conversations, by centering productivity over people. But the beauty of community is this: we don't need to be perfect just to be powerful. We need to go ahead and also be willing. So again, we just need to be willing, willing to learn, willing to listen, willing to take responsibility without spiraling into shame. That's what makes a space feel safe. Not that nobody makes mistakes, but that when we do, we repair. And that repair becomes the soil for something deeper than support. It becomes belonging. Community built through trust and truth is not fragile. It bends, it breathes, it holds. And when we root ourselves in that kind of community, we stop waiting for institutions to save us. We become the system we've been waiting for. So if you've ever wondered whether your truth belongs in the room, it does. If you ever doubted whether healing counts as leadership, it does. And if you've ever questioned whether your presence, your honesty, or your lived experience could help build something better, it already has. Keep showing up with truth, keep choosing accountability, and keep building the kind of community that holds, heals, and dares to grow. Because real change begins right here with you, right where you are today, in the courage to be seen and the commitment to see others too. Now, as we close, I do want to leave you with this. You do not have to be fully healed to lead. You do not need a perfect plan or polished story to make an impact. You do not need anyone's permission to take up space or to tell your truth. You just have to be willing to bring what you've lived through, not for applause, not for validation, but for transformation. I believe the strongest movements don't begin in press conferences or boardrooms. They begin in kitchens, around tables, where hard conversations finally happen. They begin in healing circles, where silence breaks and eyes meet. They begin in late night texts. I'm not okay, but I'm still here. They begin with someone who was told they were too much or not enough says, this time I'm writing the ending. Again, I want you to go ahead and reflect on that. This time I'm writing the ending. We're not here to fit into systems that erased us. We are not here to be inspirational sound bites. We are here with our lived experiences to reimagine the whole thing. Rooted in lived experience, rooted in resilience, rooted in community. And rising, right? Not just as survivors, but as strategists, system builders, visionaries, and leaders who hold both pain and possibility at once. We're the ones that we've been waiting for, and this time we lead the story. And we lead it together with courage, with care, with knowing that what we've lived through is exactly what makes us ready. So thank you for attending Mom Woman Lead 2025, and we hope to see you next year.